The morning of the earthquake began with hope. Fragile, desperate hope clutched in the rough hands of a man who had already lost too much. Daniel Cooper, 34-year-old single father, had spent the last 3 years fighting every day to keep his little girl fed, clothed, and smiling despite the storm that life had thrown at him. Today was supposed to be the turning point, the day he would finally turn things around. He had an interview at Morgan Engineering, one of the biggest firms in the city, the kind of job that promised stability, health, insurance, and a future for his 6-year-old daughter, Emily. For weeks, he had rehearsed answers, borrowed a clean shirt from a neighbor, and promised Emily that soon she wouldn't have to eat instant noodles for dinner anymore. But fate, as it often does, had crueler plan. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of doing the right thing even when it costs everything, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. It helps us bring you more true, heart-touching stories like this. When that morning the city trembled, the ground rumbled beneath Daniel's worn shoes as he stepped off the bus, his mind full of hopeful, rehearsed phrases about teamwork and leadership. Then came the thunderous crack, like the roar of something ancient waking beneath the earth. Buildings groaned, glass shattered, and in seconds panic swallowed the streets. People screamed, cars crashed, alarms blared. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Daniel stumbled, falling to his knees as the concrete split near his feet. He looked up just in time to see an office building collapse in a deafening roar of dust and stone, the air filled with smoke and the metallic scent of fear. He thought of Emily, safe at her school on the other side of the city, and his heart clenched. He had to get to her. But then he heard it cry, a faint, broken voice calling for help from the rubble just a few meters away. Through the thick dust he saw a slab of concrete pinning a woman beneath the ruins. She was young, maybe in her late 20s, her white blouse torn and smeared with dust and blood. Her lips trembled as she gasped for air, her eyes wide with terror. For a split second Daniel hesitated. His watch told him he had 15 minutes before his interview. If he ran now, he could still make it, but if he turned away, she would die. His conscience screamed louder than any fear of losing the job. He threw off his jacket and ran toward the wreckage. The air was heavy with smoke and cries of pain. Daniel pushed through debris, ignoring the sting of cuts on his arms. He crouched beside her, his heart hammering as he tried to lift the concrete slab. It was impossibly heavy. His muscles strained and he bit back a groan of pain. The woman whimpered, whispering that she couldn't feel her legs. Daniel looked around desperately for help, but chaos reigned everywhere. No one was coming. He knew he had to chase his dream or save a stranger. He braced his hands under the slab and pushed with every ounce of strength he had left. Pain shot through his back, but the concrete shifted just enough for him to slide a broken piece of rebar underneath his leverage. Inch by inch he managed to lift it higher, long enough to pull her out. He collapsed against him, trembling, coughing from the dust. He carried her away from the ruins, his arms shaking, until they reached an open patch of street where the emergency teams were beginning to arrive. When he finally sat her down, she looked up at him through teary eyes, her lips trembling as she tried to speak. "Thank you," she whispered before she lost consciousness. Daniel sat beside her as paramedics rushed in. His shirt was soaked with sweat and blood, his hands shaking from exhaustion. As they loaded her into the Ambulance, someone asked for his name. But he just shook his head. It doesn't matter, he said softly. Just help her. By the time the dust cleared and the city's trembling stopped, Daniel realized hours had passed. His phone was dead and the interview was long over. When he finally made it to Emily's school, he found her safe but frightened, clinging to her teacher. The moment she saw him, she ran into his arms sobbing. He held her close, whispering that everything would be all right, even though he didn't believe it himself. That night, as they sat in their small apartment without electricity, Emily fell asleep in his arms. Daniel stared at the cracked ceiling and felt a crushing weight of despair. The job was gone. Chance was gone, and tomorrow he would have to start over again. For the next week, Daniel kept searching for new opportunities, but the earthquake had paralyzed the city. Buildings were damaged, offices closed, interviews canceled, his savings dwindled. He sold his watch, his tools, anything that could keep food on the table. He never even knew what happened to the woman he saved. All he had was the memory of her terrified face and the faint hope that she had survived. Then one afternoon, as he returned from a long day of failed job hunts, there was a knock on his door. When he opened it, a woman stood there dressed in a crisp suit, her hair still showing faint scars of dust in its strands. Took him a moment to recognize her, but when she smiled, he froze. It was her, the woman from the rubble, alive, standing, radiant. Introduced herself as Sarah Mitchell. She explained that she had been searching for him since the day of the earthquake. She had seen his face in flashes, the man who had lifted concrete with bleeding hands to save her life. She was the daughter of the CEO of Morgan Engineering, the very company where Daniel had lost his interview. Daniel was speechless. Sarah's eyes glistened as she spoke. The rescue teams told me what you did. They said, you stayed until they took me away, then disappeared. You saved my life and I never even got to say thank you properly. She handed him an envelope. Inside was a letter offering him a full-time position at Morgan Engineering, with a starting salary higher than he had even dared to hope for. Daniel's hands shook as he read the letter. He looked up, his eyes full of disbelief. Why would you do this? He asked quietly. Sarah smiled, her voice trembling. Because when I was trapped under that concrete, I thought I was going to die. You gave me a second chance. Now it's my turn to give you one. Tears filled Daniel's eyes as he sank into the doorway, the weight of gratitude and relief overwhelming him. Emily peeked from behind his leg, her little eyes wide with curiosity. Sarah knelt down to smile at her. Your dad's a hero, she whispered. Never forget that. That night, as Daniel tucked Emily into bed, he looked at her tiny, peaceful face and felt something he hadn't in a long time. Oh, he thought about how close he had come to giving up that day, how life could change in a heartbeat, and how sometimes the kindest things we do come back to us when we least expect it. The following week, Daniel started his new job. It wasn't easy. He had to learn new systems, long hours, and balance fatherhood with his responsibilities. But every day he walked into that office, he carried a quiet pride. Sarah often stopped by to check on him, and slowly a friendship began to grow between them, one rooted not in pity but in gratitude and mutual respect. Months later, on a quiet evening, the city lights glowed once again, no longer scarred by the quake. Daniel stood by his apartment window, watching Emily play on the floor, her laughter filling the room. He looked at his hands scarred, calloused yet strong, and smiled. Sometimes he thought life has a strange way of rewarding those who choose compassion over convenience. He had skipped his biggest interview to save a stranger, and in doing so had saved his own future. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still matters. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Every small gesture helps us continue sharing stories that bring light into dark places.